The following is an interview that I did with Chris Williamson on his podcast. It goes very deep into my story, deep in a direction that I swore I would never go as far as what I put out there in content. My history, my childhood, my upbringing, my eating disorder, my obsessive compulsive disorder, a lot of very interesting things that were quite hard for me to share. So here it goes.
What's your background? What do you do?
Just a guy on the internet, man. I'm for me, I'm a translator of science. I'm not a biochemist. I don't pretend to be one. I take the research. I know how to read a paper very well. And I tend to get really overly excited about stuff like that. And then I translate it and I try to put it into layman terms and do a decent job at articulating complex subject matter into a way that's digestible for people so that they can have a chance to really review the research and understand and put another brick in the wall for themselves towards being healthier, having more vitality, and just being better humans.
Why did you get interested in that?
I realized not that long ago that I'm not that great at many things, but I'm decent at a lot of things. And I realized the one thing that I am really good at is articulating and communicating. And for a long time, I tried to fight that. I always wanted to be the strongest guy in the room or the smartest guy in the room. I always wanted to kind of, face adversity and I want to be that guy. And then I realized that, you know what, it's actually really good to be a good, effective communicator. And I started leaning into that. And the moment that I leaned into that and I fed the stallion, starved the pony, so to speak, I realized that I can take all these things that I'm halfway decent at, but really get people excited about them with my ability to communicate it.
Talk to me about childhood for you. You have a very interesting background. What was that like?
Yeah, my childhood, it's interesting. I don't talk about it much. And recently it's been coming up more, probably because people are trying to figure out what makes me tick. I came from what looked like a pretty normal, conventional childhood on the surface. I had a loving mother, had a very loving father. I ran my first 10K when I was, I think, 5 years old, right? So I was got into running at a very young age. And then I'm flashing forward. I ran my first marathon when I was 11. And the reason that I'm starting with that is not to say, hey, I'm this amazing person, look at me. It's because now as an adult and as a father myself, I look back at that and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. What was my mom thinking? And I love my mom and I'm close with my mom. And I did everything with my mom. I was always along by her side, right? And I realized that she did these things and I wanted to be like her. I wanted to be with her. And my mom would run marathons, so I would run marathons too. And my mom sort of had this mentality of hey, well, if you want to hang out with me, then you're going to do the stuff that I'm going to do. And there was no real worry about it. It was just the way that it is.
After this video, get 20% off of any Bubs Naturals product. Now, particularly their Halo Creamer. So we're talking just a couple of simple ingredients, nothing hidden in it, no weird nastiness. We're talking MCT oil powder, we're talking grass-fed butter, and they have a vegan formula that doesn't have the grass-fed butter as well, and tapioca starch. So it's filling, it lights your brain up, and it's a good way to start the day, but the taste is unbelievable. There's a lot of creamers that are out there, but this one just has a light fluffiness to it that just tastes unreal. So 20% off whatever you want from Bubs Naturals using code Thomas20, but definitely check out their Halo Creamer. Now, the cool thing about Bubs Naturals is that 10% of the proceeds go to charity in the name of Glenn Doherty. Now, Glenn Doherty was a Navy SEAL who went by the call sign Bub, which is where the name Bubs Naturals comes from. So the charities are all about helping the families and the relatives, people that are associated with special operations. So when you're looking at the military, you're looking at families that maybe have had family members killed in action, you name it. And Bubs is there to support them. So that's one of the big reasons I stand behind them. What they're doing is amazing. As someone that personally works with special forces and special operations myself, it's very near and dear to me. So again, 20% off whatever you get through Bubs, and know that 10% of those proceeds are going to an awesome cause.
Hang on, so we're talking age 4 in order to be able to get ready to run this at age
I don't even
5.
think I was running I remember running 2-3 miles at age 4 or 5. And it was
with mom?
Yeah, with mom. And I remember people, because we lived really close to these wineries, we lived in Sonoma, and I remember people clapping, when I would go on runs, I'd be like, way to go, mom, it was cool. I enjoyed it. There was never a moment where I didn't like it. I always loved it. That evolved into sort of loving the pain of it too, which, I mean, you talk to endurance athletes and that's a pretty common trait. They kind of almost have this masochistic type feeling with it. Yeah. So, I mean, I was training at a very young age for that, and that just became part of my life. I was the skinny runner kid that was made fun of because it was weird to run. You know, you're in elementary school and you're the kid that wants to go out for a run. You're the kid that decides to like run home from school. Like I was a weird kid. Don't get me wrong. I was like the hiking boots and shorts type of kid. So yeah, I was weird, but my mom exposed me to so many different crazy experiences to the point where other kids thought it was insane. Like, so I was the weird kid as a result of my mom always exposing us to very interesting things. When I was 11 years old, I backpacked the John Muir Trail from Yosemite to Mount Whitney. It was 230 miles. It took us 16 days and no experience in backpacking. And then went back again the next year to do it again and did it in 11 days. And ran out of food, ran out of food for 4 days. We come back, CPS gets called on us because I'm emaciated. And my mom's like, no, these kids wanted to do this. And we're like, yeah, no, mom is awesome. Like, trust me, we want to do this stuff. The childhood was just crazy, but at the time, nothing felt weird about it because it was normal to us. And we were never put in a situation where we felt in danger or anything like that. But we were always subconsciously held to this very high standard. Like, you should perform. And it made me a very results-oriented person that unfortunately damaged me a little bit as an adult, because being a results-oriented person has resulted in me being, well, results-oriented, which I don't necessarily know is the best way for me to go through life. But yeah, there's a lot of nuance, a lot of detail that goes on there, but it's just interesting experiences that made people look at me funny.
Were you bothered by school? Were you interested in school?
Hated school. Hated it.
Why?
Well, for one, I just always felt like I could go faster. Like I felt like very restricted. And I don't mean that in some conceited way, like, oh, I'm smarter than people. That's not even it. I just felt like, this is not a good use of my time. Like I felt like this is terrible.
From what age?
I got it. This is a funny story. I got expelled from preschool. The only person in the history, at that time in the history of Sunshine Preschool in Sonoma, California, probably can fact check this, to get expelled. I just wouldn't have it. I wanted to go home. And I tried to escape. I did escape. And I wanted to go home. I would just scream and cry until my mom came to pick me up and said, I don't want to be here. And kindergarten, I made it through kindergarten, but it was like every day after school, I would cry waiting for my mom to come pick me up because I wanted to go home so bad. I just did not want to be there. I hated it. And I don't know to this day, like, why. Kids weren't particularly mean to me. I actually had friends. I was weird, but it wasn't like I was bullied. Like, I mean, I was kind of picked on because I was the skinny runner kid, but it was more just like people joshing me all the time. Yeah. But I hated it. I hated being confined. I hated being restrained.
And what was home life like?
Home life was, it was, as a young kid, it was pretty normal. My mom went to school. She was a microbiology major, but she never really used it professionally. She owned a landscaping business for a while, and then she became a school bus driver randomly. It was very interesting. She randomly decided, I'm just going to drive the school bus because it's a way for me to have summers off with my kids and a way for me to have the same hours as my kids. And that was a root of me getting made fun of a lot. Oh, Tom's mom's the school bus driver. My dad owned a bookstore in Oakland. This is very interesting because at the time, like, I'm a kid, I don't really care. My dad owns a bookstore, whoop-de-doo. But as I grow older, I realized that this bookstore, DeLauer's Super Newsstand, 13th and Broadway in Oakland, was the world's largest newsstand. So it had newspapers and magazines from all over the world that would come there 1 to 2 days later after they were released in their respective countries. So as a result, my father's bookstore was like this massive cultural melting pot in Oakland, where people from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Australia, whatever, would come there to pick up respective papers and whatever from their countries. So not only was it a cultural melting pot where people all came together and put aside their differences, which was very interesting, it was also the site of a lot of hate crime, the site of so massive thing in history. So if you look up DeLauer's Super Newsstand, you see that. It's been around, family business. So I never realized that until I was an adult. I was like, wow, that's very wild. My dad worked a lot, but he was still a very present father. So home life was good. It was, I could pick apart little things. Everyone can. There were extreme situations. There were situations that I probably wouldn't talk about publicly, but nothing that was ever dangerous or bad.
What about when you get into teen years, when you start to take life a little bit more seriously?
Yeah. So by the time I was about 9 or 10, I ended up with obsessive compulsive disorder. I used to have to flip light switches. I was always, I remember I had these like hardwood floor in my, in one like transitional area of my house. And it had like these squares. It kind of looked like, where the Celtics play, like that court, how it has like the, and I could only step on the ones that had the grains facing forward. If I stepped on the grains facing laterally, it was terrible. And it was almost always surrounding something happening to my mom. Like if I stepped on the wrong one, my mom would die. I literally took the step on a crack, break your mother's back thing, like literally. So I was like, I can't, it will break my mom's back. Like I had this attachment to my mother. So I suffered with that. By the time I was in middle school, I can't remember the term for it. I was pulling my hair out. So I had bald spots in my hair because I was pulling my hair out just from anxiety. So I was put on, benzodiazepines at like age 13, but I didn't really take them. They were
How common is that for a child to be prescribed benzos at that age?
Not very common. It's not a healthy thing. It was like for an emergency case situation, right? So it was in one of those things where like it was not like my mom was supposed to maintain control of them and things like that. And I don't even ever recall taking them, right? So it was one of those things where with that, I ran into all kinds of crazy situations. I mean, it was just, I felt constantly anxious. Like my teen years were really, really tough. And of course, pulling my hair out led to getting made fun of. And the only thing that I really found control in was running. Like I could be in control when I was running. So for me, running became even more a part of my identity. It was like, and that carries through to me today. Like I don't necessarily feel whole unless running is a part of my life. And I'm very self-aware of that because it goes all the way back to, a coping mechanism for me. So early teen years were particularly rough for me.
What is happening with your sense of your own body as you're growing? Have you got any body dysmorphia at this age?
Not as much now because I'm very aware of it. Definitely went through phases, even phases of self-sabotage. Like when I became overweight, I ultimately had an eating disorder. I talked about this with Nick Bear. There was a point when I was like, 13, 14, where I used to kind of like measure my wrist with my fingers. Mm-hmm. And if I could have room to like rattle my wrist around in my fingers, that was like a win for me. Mm-hmm. Like no reason. I didn't want to be skinny. I didn't care. It was an element of control. All of this
was an arbitrary measure that you decided, especially given the fact that like the width of your wrist growing and the length of your fingers growing between the ages of 12 and 16 aren't going to happen in sync with each other.
Correct. So there's nothing there.
It was an arbitrary choice.
Yeah, it was the same kind of satisfaction that I would almost get out of it was the same kind of satisfaction that I would almost get out of flipping light switches. It was just something but I also felt very in control with that. I felt like I can control when I don't eat. I can control when I don't eat. I didn't really have an obsession with body composition. I suppose if I reverse engineer it, I could think about it and say, yeah, like I wanted to be lighter for running and it made more sense. So I was very skinny, very frail. And then when I was like 13, 14, I did discover the gym and I got really interested in the gym. And actually the gyms, I would arguably say saved my life. Like it was one of those, because I was one of those people that had I gotten into the wrong drugs at that point in time, I think it could have been very bad. I've always been a very obsessive person, but to come back to your question, like the body dysmorphia now, to a certain degree, yes, because my profession depends on me being lean in a lot of ways. So do I have anxiety around not looking a certain way? I would be lying if I said no. But it's in control and I'm self-aware of it. But when I became overweight, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I reverse engineer that and I think about it. I was like, it's almost a means of self-sabotage. It was me in a way, like I was aware that I was gaining weight and like gained a bunch of weight fast. And it was almost like this revolt against how I was before. And it's interesting. It's just a very wild thing. I'm a very self-aware, psychoanalytical person. So I try to look at these things. But yeah.
Didn't you say something about psychedelics when you were younger?
So that's what's interesting. So like when I was in 7th and 8th grade, I tried acid. Like I smoked pot like a crazy kid, 7th, 8th grade. It was, and I know some people judge on that, but I was a kid. I was a lost kid, right? Like what? And I look back at that now, being a father, I'm just like, what was I missing? Because I feel like my childhood wasn't up. Like it doesn't look like it way on the surface, right? But there's certain things, but I'm like, why was I doing that stuff? And I got that stuff out of my system so young. By the time I was 14, I was like a total square. Like I didn't even drink.
Were you doing that with people?
So generally, yes. I had like 2 close friends that I would, and it was weird. And I lived in Italy for a semester. I went to school in Italy for a semester when I was, I can't remember if I was 12 or 13. I guess it would have been, I think I turned 13 when I was there. And that was a cool experience because my mom said, hey, we're going to enroll you in homeschool so that you can study abroad and take college courses if we can get you approved for it. So basically we did. We got me approved through like AIFS, and I was able to get college credits to study art history as a 12, 13-year-old while concurrently homeschooled. Great experience. But all the college kids that I was around thought it was really fun to like get me drunk, get face, pump me full of whatever the they wanted to. And for me, it was kind of fun because I was the cool, like 12-year-old. And you're taking people that are like 19, 20 years old, and they're just like, oh, cool, let's with this kid.
Yes.
And I look back at that and I'm like, I was exposed to some interesting stuff at a very young age.
But then you come out of that and you've almost had a like hedonistic period before you've even hit puberty. And now you're going through your teen years being a little bit more square. How did the OCD blend with being ripped out of your hometown, being taken over to Italy, also all of these new experiences, older kids coming in and getting you to do stuff? I would have imagined that those 2 things would have clashed very badly.
Dude, I think it actually was a pattern interrupt for me.
Oh, so
I think it's exactly what I needed. And sometimes I wonder if I was like, did my mom know this? Like my mom's philosophy when things was like, when everyone goes this direction, go that direction. Where everyone wanted to put me in therapy and everyone wanted to fix the problem and everyone wanted to, hypnosis this, and nothing was working. I was still anxious. I was still dealing with problems. My mom's just like, maybe this kid needs the mountains. Let's do this. Maybe this freaking kid needs some like different cultural experiences. And that helped me. It absolutely helped me. But in certain ways, it may have made it worse. But I don't think keeping me in the confined little box. I hated my hometown. As an adult now, like I look back at it and I appreciate it, but I hated my hometown and I just couldn't stand it. And I just wanted to get out all the time. And I've always felt like that, or I had always felt like that as a kid. I felt very confined in any situation you put me in: school, my town, even my state. And I would sometimes develop resentment towards it because I'm just like, I got to get out of this. And the only way for me to get out of it is to hate it as much as I possibly can until I finally explode and get out of it.
Okay. So you're getting toward the end of your teens now. When do you start to gain weight?
So gained weight at the probably like 19, 20.
Oh, okay. So we've got a little bit of time.
Yeah. So I put on some muscle, and that was kind of the golden period of my teens. Like from like 15 to 18, I was independent study, and a lot of the reason I did that is after my mom and dad's divorce. When I was 13, I lived with my mother. My mother was dealing with a number of different things, both legally, mentally, just a lot of struggles that I don't necessarily need to go into detail, but she needed some help and stuff. So for me, it was independent study where it was like homeschool, but I was still part of the school and could still enroll in school sports. A really cool program. It worked well for someone like me, but then I also worked 40 or 50 hours a week to help support my mom and to help just kind of keep life going. So from 14, the time I could get my worker's permit.
What were you doing? 40 or 50 hours?
Bagging groceries. So bagging groceries, and then I worked for a financial services company where I would just like file stuff. So I'd work as many hours as I could. So when you have your worker's permit, I think I could only work like 30 hours at a select role, and then I would go to like a different role and get paid under the table. So it's
plus school.
But I was independent. Honestly, I was never challenged by school. Like independent study, I could get all my work done in like 2 hours for the week. Like it wasn't a big deal. And honestly, I held like a 3.98 GPA. Like it wasn't hard for me. And like school just didn't challenge me. Of course, I wasn't trying to be challenged. Like I was like in AP English, I was in high English. I sucked at math. So I was like baseline math and just like, so I kind of skated through school.
Getting by.
Yeah. Just getting by, but with good grades. And, but I just was not challenged. And for me, it was like, I learned the value of $1 really quick because I'm like, okay, well, I know how to work. And, that was what was important to me. It was like, how do I work? How do I get all this done?
You realize how much of an outlier situation that is, right? To be working between 40 and 50 hours at the age of 14 or 15, plus doing self-directed homeschool whilst supporting mum, whilst trying to learn about yourself and the world around you, whilst dealing with the after effects of OCD.
Yeah, probably is a lot. But everything prior to that felt so normal, right? And it's wild.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about anybody's life experience, right? You're never going to, until Elon fully dials in Neuralink, you're never going to be able to feel what it's like to be in the texture of somebody else's mind. You're never going to know what life is like to live as somebody else. And with the advent of the internet and social media, which kind of does give us the view through the eyes of other people, at least in a small dose. But as a kid, when you're relatively sheltered, you're not exposed to as many people or things, and you don't have that ability to use theory of mind, the life that you have is the only one that you've ever known. So it is normal. Very much is. Mine as well. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have siblings. I was an only child. So I'm like, well, this is just what life is, isn't it? It's you and mum and dad and the dogs. Like, you don't know what it's like to have a house that's got cats. You don't know what it's like to have a house that's got blah, blah, blah. I didn't know what it was like to have a house that had it. We always, every house that we were in, mum and dad loved baths. So we always had like a bath. So I'm like, the first time that I lived in a house with a shower was when I went to university. So I'm like, your life experience, especially if you're a little bit more sheltered, but like constrained sometimes, whether by availability or habit, can be difficult for you to sort of rip yourself out of that and work out what's going on.
I could never understand why my sister, who's 4 years older, when she went off to the Air Force Academy, I never understood why she was so manically worried about me. Because I was, 14. I'm just like, Liz, like, everything's fine. Like, why are you freaking out? Like, so stressed out, worried about me all the time. Like, what's going to happen to Thomas? What's going to happen to Thomas? And all I could think, I was like, oh, you're dealing with some serious issues there, girl. And then I'm like, man, I talk with her now. She's like, you see why I was freaking the heck out.
Maybe I was one of the potential issues. Okay, so you're now working full time whilst doing your self-directed stuff for school, going to the gym, but you're saying that this is also the golden period.
Well, I felt great. There was nothing it was a period of time where I felt in complete control. Like, I've got infinite energy. I'm in my teens.
Made of rubber and magic.
Get tired, like whatever. Like, yeah. I could work. I was making money, helping support mom, but I was also making my own money. And so by the time I was, 15, 16, things started to kind of mellow out a little bit. I didn't need to work as much. I was still working probably 30, 40 hours. And then at that rate, I was still running cross country in the fall. So I was a runner. Of course, I'd run cross country. I discovered rugby my junior year. So I played rugby. I was a winger. I really enjoyed rugby. It was a way for me to connect. On the surface, I didn't have any issues socially. Like, I had what would look like a normal social dynamic, but deep down, it was a struggle for me. Deep down, it was really hard for me to, I had to work to maintain friendships because I felt like it just didn't come natural. I was a very introverted person, and that probably just I think that was a nurture versus nature thing. I think that was something that was manufactured as a result of working and just probably
non-typical upbringing.
Yeah, just not having the time. And my mom also did kind of make it seem growing up as though anything conventional was not okay. She used to pull us out of school. My sister and I pull us out of school sometimes to be like, screw school. Like, we're going to go hike. We're going to go do some, pull us out of school. Like, no parents would do that. But my mom really wanted to be around us. Was she wanting to be around us? Was she wanting to groom us? I don't understand, right? But I enjoyed it because any opportunity to not be in school, I was all about. So for me, the fact that I could independent study, didn't have to spend wasting my time at school, could work and actually do something constructive. So yeah, I was still running, not as much running, but I was starting to lift. And, I got in pretty good shape in high school. And then I met my wife when I was 16 and she was 14. And that's when things just got really good. Like, things felt great. Like, I had met ultimately what I felt was the woman of my dreams and is the woman of my dreams. And I married her and have 2 kids with her. Never been with another woman in my life. And talk about coping mechanisms, right? Like, talking about my wife had a similar background, not the same, of course, but her family dynamic was very twisted. And we found each other and we just locked onto each other, man. Like, our messed up family dynamics and, 2 divorced families. And we're just we got each other. And I was like, finally, this chick understands me. Someone understands me. Someone loves me for me, short shorts and hiking boots. And it's awesome. So that
sounds like a blessing.
Dude, it's amazing.
Do you think about where you would be if you hadn't met your wife at that point?
Dude, I honestly think I think I'd probably be dealing with addiction and things like that. I really do. Because she is the Jane to my Tarzan, without that, I'm just crazy. Like I would fly off the handle because like I'm just so high energy. So like I need a little bit of that guardrail. Like I need that. And I think now I've developed traits and I'm mature enough that heaven forbid something ever happened to her. Like I don't think I'd spiral off. But I think during those fundamental years, it was so unbelievably like critical.
What happens with the weight gain?
So the weight gain came, I always joke about this because out there in the internet, it makes it seem like I was this obese slob that was always that way and I struggled with my weight. The struggle was real, but what people don't understand is the mental issues that came from that and stemmed that. So a lot of it started as somewhat of a bulk gone wrong. It started out as I'm going to put on some weight for muscle, right? I'm going to try to gain some muscle. And then over time, I just kind of stopped working out, got obsessed with, I ended up going into a commission only healthcare recruiting job. All this high stress stuff where I was just trying to make money. So in the same stuff I was doing earlier, except now I am completely on my own and I've got responsibilities and my body just wasn't working the same way that it used to. So it was very easy for me to put on muscle, but then I also put on a bunch of fat with it too. So I always kind of joke. I was like, this was a classic example of a bulk gone wrong, but it wasn't like I was bulking on 6 cups of brown rice per day. I was eating Jack in the Box tacos. I was eating everything under the sun. I remember my wife's brother being like, looking at this baking sheet that I had full of tater tots, like just an entire giant baking sheet. And I remember him being like, that's healthy. And I just remember that's such a snide little comment. And I was like, convinced myself, I'm like, this is healthy. I'm bulking. I was totally like Eric Cartman in Beefcake, like that. I was like, weight gain 5,000. So fortunately, I wasn't overweight for a long period of time. It was like 2.5 years but I tipped the scales close to 300 pounds at one point. And the fact that I gained the weight that fast at the time, I didn't think of it. But now I think about it now, I'm like, what the f- was mentally going on with me? This was like some weird element of self-sabotage. It was like, I'm not a stupid guy. I'm smart enough to know and self-aware enough to know that like, if you eat 10,000 calories, it was like I was stuffing my face trying to gain weight. And I remember my wife even making comments like being like, I love you anyway. I don't know what you're doing. But it's crazy. It's like you see those, My 600 Pound Life, you see that stuff where these people are laying in bed and they know what they're doing and they're doing it to themselves. And I was walking down that path. And then I think about like, oh my gosh, my sort of disordered eating past with being somewhat anorexic, this was like the opposite of it. I'm like, holy crap, I've got like some serious eating disorder stuff that I got to work with. Fortunately, I was able to get a grasp on it. I always joke about the moment when I saw someone that was an acquaintance of mine. They were driving down the road and they saw me eating Jack in the Box tacos. And maybe you've heard the story because it's floating around the internet all the time, but I went through Jack in the Box, pulled into a stall afterwards and was eating my translucent Jack in the Box tacos because they're so full of grease, you can see through them. And this person drives by and he's not a close friend, he's an acquaintance, but he just waves at me nonchalantly. And it was the fact that it was such a nonchalant wave that I'm like, this dude, like he wasn't shocked by the fact that I'm sitting here stuffing my face. This was status quo normal to him. This is how people see me. The fact that he wasn't like, oh my God. The fact that he looked at me and was like, oh, what's up, Tom? I was like, oh, I'm caught.
I'm that guy.
I'm that guy. And that was it. That was the moment. People were like, what was your call to action? Did someone say you're going to die? No, but I did make myself type 2 diabetic. I did give myself hypertension. I clinically made myself type 2 diabetic. So in a 2-year period of time. And let that be a testament to how a f***ed up diet can really mess you up, right? It can mess you up quick. And it took me like 7 years to get that normal again. But anyway, all of that aside, that's, so this happens by the time I'm like, 22, 23, given my background and kind of what I was doing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of happening in the background there with my healthcare career, healthcare administration, going into ancillary lab services in the private equity world for a short period of time. I really developed a really strong knack for biochemistry because I was essentially in medical sales. So I knew I had to be able to sell to physicians and be able to explain various lab services, salivary cortisol testing, explain these things. And I'm like, I knew I was a really good salesperson with that because I knew so much about the body just because I was so in tune with myself. And I got super into biochemistry, just super into it to the point where I'm like, I want to go back to school for biochemistry. I dropped out of college, and like, I want to go to school for biochemistry. I want to go back. And then I realized like, you know what? Like I'm actually making good money doing what I'm doing without that. and I'm really good at what I do. And physicians respect me and the community respects me and the scientific community was respecting me then. So anyway, the point is like, I had a good breadth of knowledge. So all it took was like that catalyst for me to be like, I got to get my life in order. And, then there's this kind of whole interstitial period between when I launched my brand and everything like that, which is kind of, there was some downtime. And,
what did you do to take yourself from what's the type of diabetes that you gave yourself, and what does that mean? That hypertension, all that, and then how do you go from where you were to even anything approaching health?
Yeah. So, type 2 diabetes, I mean, clinically, if you're over 125 nanograms per deciliter glucose, you're technically clinically diabetic and you're fasting glucose, or pre-diabetic. And then when you start climbing over like 140, then you're kind of in that clinical range. So I remember my glucose being like 144 fasting repeatedly. Bad, really bad. Knowing what I know now, I know why that happened. Knowing what I know now, I know how it was corrected. All I knew was that I needed to reverse it and I needed to fix this issue, because I looked at my wife and I'm like, this is stupid. Like, all this happened in a pursuit of building muscle, up my body in a pursuit of building muscle, but also then losing sight of that and up my body in a pursuit of making money. So these two vanity things, muscle and money, like could have completely up my life. I did up a lot of my life because it took me years to get my health back. And there's certain things I still struggle with to this day as a result of just like massive basic binging for a couple of years.
What like?
Well, I mean, for example, like it's still like my testosterone levels are still pretty tanked, right? I think that I did that damage at a very critical age. I think at a time when testosterone levels should have been peaking, I was ruining them, right? So, things like that. I deal with that, the mental repercussions of it. So there's a lot of attributes where, maybe it's more difficult for my body to produce hormones naturally because at that point, it was, obviously I stay in shape. Obviously I'm lean. It doesn't affect me too much like on the surface, but maybe there's stuff deeper down. Did I take years off my life? Possibly. Was it a massive hormetic stressor that's going to make me live to be 130? Maybe. I don't know.
That would be great if the secret was Jack in the Box tacos for you to
the whole time.
Centenarian. Yeah, it was staring us in the face the whole time. So what you mentioned there is these two things around money and vanity. But as you said earlier on, you have this sense of obligation to be in shape now because your business relies on the condition that you're in, at least in part, So that dynamic is maybe much more integrated, maybe much more under your control, maybe much more holistic, transcended and included, but it's definitely still there.
It's definitely still there. And if it wasn't for having my first kid, my son, I think I might've been chasing this for all the wrong reasons. I thoroughly enjoy helping people, but I was starting to notice that I enjoyed the validation of helping people. I didn't just enjoy helping people. And it wasn't like I'm doing this for me, but at the same time, I was like, I'm doing this for, once again, a dopamine hit. Like this dopamine hit that I get out of, this was, 5-7 years ago, creating content. I was like, before my son was born, I'm just like, I'm good at this. The brand is growing, but felt so empty. Felt so good. Or felt so wrong, right? Like nothing felt good. And when I had my son, 5.5 years ago, or at least when I found out we were pregnant, so 6.5 years ago, things changed, man. Like life just has to change. And all of a sudden, like when my son came into this world, and actually, right before my son, we found out we were pregnant, a few days later, my dad passed away. So there was a lot of very interesting stuff that happened that sort of shifted rocked my world, man. And what probably needs to be said to be able to explain the full story is, you notice I haven't said much about my dad. And I realized that like my mom, in an effort to like keep us with her all the time, sort of kept us away from our dad. And I don't think she was meaning to do it. Maybe she was, I don't know. I never want to speak ill of my mom. I love my mom so much. But it's weird because I felt like I didn't really establish a relationship with my dad until I was an adult. And then pretty much as soon as I established a relationship with him, he got a cancer diagnosis and I didn't get it. So I never got the relationship with my dad. And like to this day now with like my age, like I crave a dad so much, right? Like I miss and we found out we were pregnant on Valentine's Day of 2017. And my wife gives me a Valentine's Day card and it's got the pregnancy test in it. And she had just found out that day too. So like, we're like, I almost passed out. Like I, think my wife videoed it. Sneaky bastard. Like she videoed it. I turned pale and like kind of like put a fake smile on, for a second. And then, 30 seconds, a minute goes by and I'm like, wow, okay, this is going to be cool. Like there's no turning back. So like, this is going to be awesome. And, then my dad was in hospice, but then like the next day we get the call that, hey, like he's going down. Like you got to come up to the Bay Area and come see him. And like 4 days prior to this, we lose our dog that had been with my wife and I since we were together in high school, right? So it was like, lost the dog, found out we're pregnant. And then we got to, let's make a beeline up to see my dad. So go see my dad, hold my dad's hand and tell him he's totally incoherent. He's out. And I said, Dad, you're going to be a grandpa. And like, he hadn't made any signs of life whatsoever. Like he was just breathing, and cracked a smile. And hour and a half later, he died. And it was like, he waited and it was like, so just talk about just powerful stuff all happening at once, where it was like, I got this, like a little bit of closure, but also this sense of like, I don't want to go super deep, but like right before the night before my son was born, I had a dream where my son was born. I was walking down my childhood hallway. My brother, who's 15 years older, half brother, was there and just giving me like a nod of approval. I walk past like the bathroom, my sister's standing there giving me a nod of approval. And then I walk and I turn the corner in my hallway and my dad, I just remember his big Italian hands of this dream that's like reached out. I didn't see his face. I could just see his hands and like handed the baby over to him. And then I woke up from the dream and my wife was going into labor. This is the weirdest, crazy thing, man. And like with all of that, like, dude, something just clicked, man. It was like, I gotta like change, like something needs to change. And I can't tell you what actually changed, man, but like how I looked, how I created content, how I looked at how I wanted to help people, how I looked at how I wanted to like make the world a better place for my son, how I wanted to be a father that was present for my son, that my dad didn't unfortunately have the ability to really do for me. Yeah. Long-winded explanation.
Given the fact that you're now a father of two, you have the opportunity to reflect on your experience both with mom and dad. Has this given you a new insight that you didn't see before? Has it thrown into harsh light some things that you thought that were totally normal? Has it motivated you to be a particular way as a father?
Yes, 1,000,000%. Yes, it's... I try to look at things. There's things that are maybe unconventional, but not necessarily bad that I look at with my childhood. I do try to look at the world through rose-colored glasses as much as I can. Like I try to find the positive in things, so all these things have made me who I am today. But the fact, I see a lot of times, especially in divorced families, where parents pit children against one another. And it happened in my wife's family. And unfortunately, I think it happened in mine. And I don't think that it was necessarily intentional. I think sometimes it's human nature to kind of like take, like, oh, I want to reach, I want to grab, I want to hold this. And those are the kinds of things where my wife and I talk about all the time. Like, if we ever go our separate ways, like if something ever happened, like we can't be like that.
Don't use the kids as leverage.
Like never, ever. That happened a lot. And I think that I look back at when I was dealing with most anxiety, when I was pulling the hair out, I was right at the peak of the divorce, and I'm like, what was I feeling as a kid? So like for me, it's like, man, just to be able to shower my children with love, but be able to just make them feel like they can do anything in the world as long as they put in the work and that they're always going to have a safe place. Whereas I grew up thinking that like, no, like you are only really loved if you perform. And I'm like, up until having children, I kind of thought that was the way it was supposed to be. Supposed to give this tough love, like you perform, and you equals love. Let's keep a spreadsheet. Where it's now, it's like, man, you can do whatever you want, kiddo. Like, if you are sincerely happy and you are accomplishing and you are doing good in the world, I got your back. And that has definitely transcended into how I create content, because now I'm like, I used to live in this echo chamber with what works for me. Intermittent fasting worked for me. I lost a lot of weight with it. It fucking worked for me, 100%. Keto worked for me. So that means it's going to work for you, man. And here's why. And let me give you all the justification as to why. And let me create all this content surrounding why, justifying. Suddenly I'm like, holy crap. I'm using my gift for all the wrong. Like I'm using my gift to justify what worked for me. And it motivated and inspired a lot of people. But I'm like, man, I can reach millions more people if I stop leaning into my gift as being my transformation and being my gift as my ability to articulate complex subject matter that gets people passionate and excited to be the best they can be, sincerely.
Less dogmatic, less rigid with the way that you're talking about stuff.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I talk about this so much. The fact that you cannot understand the price that certain people pay to be in a position that you think you want to be in. You know, so from the outside, the 3.5 million person YouTube channel and respected by scientists all over the world and walking around at 5 to 6% body fat and jacked and wife and kids and money and so on and so forth. We go, okay, let's just take a small inventory of all of the things that have had to happen in order to contribute to this, right? You know, the entire childhood, the working from the age of 14, the pulling the hair out, the social awkwardness, like all of that. That is the price that you need to pay to be Thomas DeLauer. And I think it's very important for people to see the human behind the success. I think it's one of the most important things. It's one of the most useful things about having conversations like this, because all of the people that I respect who have achieved success have done it in spite of a thing, not because of a thing. And, you know, for all that success looks fantastic from the outside, a lot of the time people are running away from something that they fear as well as running towards something that they want. And the vast majority of people, Michael Gervais, the guy that does is it Seeking Greatness, I think, or Chasing Elite Performance, the podcast. I asked him, he's worked with like every high performer on the planet. He helped Felix Baumgartner jump from the edge of space for the Red Bull Stratos mission. And I said, on average, do you think that high performers are happier or more miserable than the normal person? He's like, by a million miles more miserable. It's like people that perform, people that are successful, on average are more miserable. And you go, okay, well, what does it mean that the people that are the most successful are the ones with the least admirable internal states? Like, what does that mean? How should we frame success? How should we consider what we think of as being admirable, desirable? It's very difficult. It's very difficult to work out. You want the outward success, but do you really want to go through the pain and the mental texture that comes along with it?
100%, man. It's Lewis Howe has asked me, what's your level of self-love on a scale of 1 to 10? And I was like, dude, maybe like a 6, 5, 6. I was like, some days I wake up and I'm an 8, but other days I wake up and I'm a 4. I was like, so maybe it averages out to like a 5 or 6. And he was like, really? And then I flipped it around and I asked him sort of the same thing. I was like, come on, Dad, you talk to a lot of successful people. And he's like, yeah, they all kind of fall around the same as you.
Yeah.
You know, there's a level of like, I don't loathe myself, but I don't love myself. But as I try to get a grasp on this, you know, being self-aware of what drives me forward, what makes me tick, I try to be aware of that. And I try to be aware of like, okay, like, just because my self-love is a 6, that doesn't mean it's actualized into me performing at a 6. So I still try to say like, I'm still going to perform like a 10. I'm still going to eat like a 10. I'm still going to like live my life like a 10. And maybe it'll fake it till it makes it a little bit. But so far it's not. I
think that that's the way to do it, man. I believe that we lead with action. And I think that small steps are much more difficult for your psyche to deny, even if you are a glass half empty kind of person. If you continue to show up, if you continue to do the things that are good for you, if you continue to succeed in spite of your absolute certainty that you're not going to succeed, after a while, you just have this crushing weight of evidence that shows you that you are able to do this thing, or you can achieve in the way that you're intending.